Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our video with a story in which our OP turned out to be a smart guy in front of his boss. Company requires using our airline miles for work trips. I used to travel a lot for business, between 30 and 35 weeks a year. Our boss was a frequent traveler as well and taught us the tricks of the trade for accumulating frequent flyer miles, and especially status, a really great perk. Eventually, he retired and sold the company to New Boss. New Boss overheard that I had over 500,000 frequent flyer miles with my airline, not credit card points, and said he should implement a new policy, that we had to use our personal frequent flyer miles for our business travel since the company had paid for our trips. That weekend, my wife and I sat down and booked weekend trips all over the country over the next year. Boston for clam chowder? Check. New York City for a Broadway show? Check. Garlic Fest in Gilroy, California, a real and delicious thing, by the way. Check. By Monday morning, my airline frequent flyer mile account was down to about 15,000 miles. Later that week, it was time to book a trip, and he said I had to use frequent flyer miles. I brought up my account and showed him I don't have enough miles. He asked where they went, and when I said I'd booked some trips, he demanded I redeposit the miles. I pointed out there was a $150 charge per person, and since it wasn't policy, I wasn't going to pay it. PO'd, he announced going forward, we needed approval for personal use of our personal frequent flyer miles. Okay, boss, you bet. My next step was to spread my flights over any and every airline I could find to prevent accumulating the 20,000 miles required to redeem for a free ticket. I was on United, Frontier, American, Delta, Northwest, Continental, US Air, Southwest, etc. At one point, I think I booked a trip on the Mrs. Grace L. Ferguson Airline and Storm Door Company. Google it, it's a Bob Newhart routine, and more true now than when he performed it 60 years ago. He eventually figured out what I was up to, and he lost what little patience remained for me. Then the following, paraphrased, took place. Boss, I suppose you think you're a smart guy. Me? No, I know I'm a smart guy. Don't get cute. No, I'm smart. Cute's just a bonus. Look, I see my wife about 10 days a month. I live out of a suitcase. I know the aircraft evacuation speech by heart. Most of my meals are handed to me through a window. And thanks to my willingness to do this, you make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can you please just let me keep the only perk I get from all this? Boss thought about it for a bit, grunted, "Fine, keep your miles," and walked away. And our second story. Entitled father steals money as payment for a good deed. I thought it'd be a few months until I had another entitled parent encounter, but less than a week since my last one, it happened again. I was working on the tills at my supermarket serving customers during the school rush. It's around 4 p.m. I just got done serving an elderly gentleman and was now serving a middle-aged man and his daughter. The previous customer was standing to the side putting away his loyalty card and bank card when I noticed he'd dropped his bank card instead of putting it away. The father who I was serving, now referred to as ED, quickly ran over and grabbed the card. I assumed he was going to return it, but instead he ran back to the till and tapped the old man's card on the reader to pay for his shopping before grabbing his items and running after the old man. I had no customers after ED, so I approached the two as they were talking and overheard the ED saying, "You dropped your card back there, mate. Can't be losing that." He then promptly handed over the card and turned to walk away. I intervened and told the old man that ED had used his card to pay for his shopping. I also waved to our on-duty security guard to stop the ED, which he did. Myself and the old man walked down to the ED and asked him to stay put while I called the manager down. ED played dumb, spouting, "You have no right to stop me. I need to get my daughter home. This is false imprisonment," etc. Once the manager arrived, I explained what had happened, and this scumbag of a person had the audacity to say, "I could have kept the card and used it a lot more. Is that what you want me to do? You shouldn't be complaining about crap. I only used it a bit." He then turned to the old man and said something equally disgusting. "Just consider it compensation for giving it back to you." At this point, the old man was asking if he could get his money back. I headed back to my till and printed a copy of the last receipt, took the old man to the customer service desk, got his transaction refunded, and he was happy to leave there. He didn't want to press charges for theft or anything like that. We made ED pay for his shopping, and he stormed off. And yes, he's now banned from the store. Good for you for looking out for the old man. Too bad the police didn't get involved. And our next story. Abusive parents facing hatred from entire family. The background. I'm a 26-year-old female and I'm the youngest of 5. So young that by the time I was 10, I was alone in the house and my siblings had grown up. My mother and father separated when I was about 6 and divorced when I was 12. Reason for the separation was my mother's cheating with a family friend who later became my stepfather. My mother and father were still officially married for those 6 years, but my mother and I lived with my future stepfather. It started when I was about 9 or 10 until I was about 17. I wasn't allowed any privacy. I couldn't sleep with my bedroom door closed or close the door when I took a shower or bath. My stepfather also emotionally abused me. I would accidentally step on his toe and he'd blow up. I would accidentally push the grocery trolley into his heels and he would blow up. I was a nerd at school and got straight A's. That wasn't good enough. I had to get better marks. Once he poked me in the eye and I hit him with a dish towel. I was 12. He's still mad about it. My mother and her a-hole of a husband also estranged me from my father. They kept telling me that he didn't want me as kid, that he refused to pay child support, that he had a new family and I wasn't in it. This was all a lie. My father showed me the bank deposit slips. He paid more than he was court-ordered to. My sisters tried telling me that our dad didn't throw me away, but what did I know? I was a kid. I'm convinced I had Stockholm Syndrome because I still worship the ground they stood on. I mean, they treated me like a maid. I was their little slave. Too effing scared to say so because my stepfather had an awful temper and would amplify whatever I did. They kept me from attending university. I had a scholarship to study mining engineering, but they refused to let me go, told me they couldn't afford it. Later, I found out that my brother had offered to put me through university and that he'd pay for it all, and I'd live with him and his family. Of course, he asked my mother first, who declined the offer. I found out when I was 24. Still hurts. So around the time I was 16, I visited my sister and her husband. He tried to touch me up, and that was when I started to realize that it was wrong. I told my sister, and she basically attacked him. She was protective of me, not of her marriage. I went home and confronted my mother and stepfather. You know what his reaction was? He said I was a stupid girl. Then, of course, there was the incident that made me move away from them to their crappy little town. See, 2 of my nephews lived with us, aged 7 and 9 at that stage. My mother and I took a cake to school where the teacher asked to speak to me. They all knew me as the auntie, and I was basically their mother. Turns out my nephew had been dipping into my mother's purse and stole a lot of cash and a spare phone, a digital camera. So later that day to the kids' room, only to find more stuff they'd stolen, including my medication. My very strong antidepressants and mood stabilizers. I was pissed. They'd also stolen the one piece of art I had done and was really proud of and destroyed it. My mother refused to tell her husband about it. The next day, I decided I had to get away for a while and visited a friend. We played games and drank. My parents found out and freaked the F out. Oh, I was 23 at this point. They decided that I had a drinking problem and needed help. They forced me to see a psychologist. He advised me to move away, so I did. I finally got the courage to leave. I live over 3 hours away now, and they're almost entirely out of my life. I'd cut them off, but I love my nephews too much. I was pissed. I'd been diagnosed as bipolar, very bad anxiety, and to top it all off, I also got a fibromyalgia diagnosis. If you don't know what that is, I'd advise you to Google it. The short version is that because of the trauma my parents inflicted, my body started to hate me. I live in permanent pain. Anyways, I went to my father and confronted him. He was so shocked to find out what my mother had accused him of, and he's PO'd as F at both her and her husband because of what they did. I talked to both my sisters too, and they confirmed that my mother had been lying to my father. Apparently, I decided that I never wanted to see my father again and that I hated him. We talked and reconciled, but he will honestly murder my stepfather if he ever sees him again. The revenge. I went to each of my siblings and their spouses and told them everything. I told them exactly what had happened, how it happened, and I didn't spare any detail. My one sister-in-law went into mom mode and assured me that it wasn't my fault. My brother has disowned my mother and refuses to speak to her or her husband. My brother-in-law, the one that tried to touch me up, asked for my forgiveness and I granted it. He had repented and had changed, and he's now in my life as a father figure. He refuses to do anything for my mother and has become one of my strongest protectors and allies. My sister has also cut my mother out of her life. She refuses to have anything to do with our mother. My other sibling had sadly passed away. His wife has been AWOL since he died. It's their 2 kids that live with my mother. So I turned my entire family on my mother and stepfather. I ruined every relationship they had with me and my siblings. They can't even see their grandkids. Not just that, but they're now facing CPS, which is highly embarrassing to deal with in their small town. I contacted the school and told them about the physical abuse I'd suffered and begged them to keep an eye on the boys. Yikes. Turns out I made the situation with CPS worse for my mother, not the kids. They're telling everyone who'll listen what an awful person I am. Luckily, I'm a decent person and people tend to like me instantly, so no one believes them. Bad thing is, these 2 idiots put me in their will as the sole inheritor. It hasn't changed either. Nobody wants anything to do with them, so they don't know who to leave the money to. And our last story. Since you want to judge me for taking the 2nd floor, have fun waiting for the elevator. I was waiting at the elevators. Didn't take too long since my apartment building's not that big. I get inside, and right when the door closes, a hand pushes through. She looked like your typical middle-aged Karen. She presses the 17th floor and takes one look at my floor, which was the 2nd. She scoffs, glares at me, and says, "The 2nd floor? Really?" Didn't take much to pee me off. Her comment was so unnecessary and uncalled for. Who cares if it was the 2nd floor? It's my decision whether to take the stairs or not. I just finished an overnight shift, and I was exhausted. I guess my exhaustion made me extra moody because when I reached my floor, she was scrolling through her phone. I quickly run my hands through as many buttons as I could and say, "Have fun, B," right when the door closes. And because I was extra exhausted, therefore extra moody and petty, I pressed the up button when the elevator barely reached the 3rd floor so I can use the other elevator and press a bunch of buttons again to further inconvenience her, just in case she decided to get off on the 3rd floor to take the other elevator. Take the stairs then if it's not that big a deal. Just don't be effing rude to your neighbors for riding the elevators to the 2nd floor. You don't know if they're exhausted or if they have non-visible health conditions that make it hard for them to take the stairs. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.